Hey everyone, and welcome to today's explainer. If you are currently building a physical tabletop model of a power grid for your class, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're going to do something kind of magical. We are going to shrink the massive real-world power grid, that gigantic, complicated system of wires and dams and towers, into simple, bite-sized concepts that you can actually use for your projects right now. So let's just dive right in. To kick things off, I have a bit of a riddle for you. What do a nuclear plant, a wind turbine, and a hydro dam all have in common? I mean, they look completely different, right? Now, you might be guessing that they all use miles and miles of wires, or maybe that they just cost a ton of money to build. And hey, those are really good guesses. But no, the real answer is actually this totally mind-blowing secret that was discovered way back in 1831. That secret is Faraday's principle. Back in 1831, a scientist named Michael Faraday figured out that if you spin a magnet near a coil of wire, you create electricity. That's literally it. So the absolutely crucial thing to understand here is that 4 out of the 5 main power sources in the world are essentially just giant bicycles. Really, they are just massive, complicated machines built to do one simple thing: spin a magnet to make electricity. Let's break down the mechanics, because it's the exact same repetitive process for all of these power plants. Step 1. Find a fuel or a natural force. Step 2. Use that force to physically spin a giant wheel, which we call a turbine. Step 3. That turbine spins the magnet, and boom, you have electricity. The only thing that changes between a hydro dam, a wind farm, a coal plant, or a nuclear plant is simply what does the pushing. All right, section 1, nature's push, hydro and wind. Let's start with the spinners that use the direct physical movement of nature itself to push the turbines. First up is hydropower, which relies 100% on gravity. If you want a hydro dam in your tabletop model, listen up. You need to build a steep drop. Hydroelectricity works best when you have a massive, heavy volume of water sitting in a deep river valley. That water is trapped behind a huge wall. When the gates open, gravity violently pulls that water down, and that rushing river physically spins the turbine. And to really wrap your head around the sheer scale of hydropower, think about the number 14,000. That is the massive amount of megawatts generated by just one facility, Brazil's Itaipu Dam. Get this, a single large hydro dam like Itaipu actually outproduces thousands of wind turbines combined. It's so powerful that this one single dam provides about 85% of all the electricity used in the entire country of Paraguay. But the catch is, you can only build them where the geography gives you that perfect, massive river drop. Now let's talk about wind power. Instead of falling water, this uses moving air currents to push huge aerodynamic blades. Think of it like a giant, high-tech pinwheel. For your models, you really can't just stick these anywhere. Wind turbines work best on the very tops of mountains or right on the coastline. Why? Because you need spots where there are absolutely no buildings, hills, or trees to block the breeze. But here is where nature gets incredibly clever. Think about how the wet season compares to the dry season. In places like Brazil, these two energy sources form this counterintuitive genius team. During the wet season, the rivers are completely full, so hydropower hits its absolute peak. But when the dry season rolls around and those river levels start to drop, guess what happens? That is the exact time of year when the coastal winds blow the strongest. So right as hydro starts to struggle, wind power naturally steps up to save the day. Moving on to section 2, steam power, thermoelectric, and nuclear. Now, instead of relying on the weather to push the turbines, these plants use heat. The mechanics here are slightly different, but remember, they still strictly follow Faraday's rule. Step 1, create extreme heat. Step 2, use that heat to boil water until it turns into really high-pressure steam. Step 3, that incredibly fast-moving steam shoots out and spins the turbine. Now, here is a super important detail for your tabletop models. You have to build these plants near large bodies of water, like a big river or the ocean, because after that steam spins the turbine, you need cool water to cool it all back down. Whenever people hear the word thermoelectric, they almost instantly picture dirty coal or fossil fuels pumping out pollution. But honestly, that's a bit of a myth. Thermoelectric plants aren't always bad for the environment. You can actually burn renewable fuels to create that heat. Things like sugarcane waste, which is called bagasse, or wood from carefully planted forests, or even biogas. It creates steam the exact same way, it spins the exact same magnet, but it uses a fuel that we can literally just regrow. And that brings us to nuclear power. Honestly, nuclear is essentially just a really, really high-tech way to boil water. Seriously, instead of burning coal or sugarcane, it splits tiny uranium atoms. And splitting those atoms creates this incredible, intense heat. That heat boils the water, creates the steam, and spins the turbines. The huge, game-changing advantage here is that it gives you massive power, and it doesn't care at all if it's raining or windy outside. Now, if I were to ask you what comes out of those giant, thick, white plumes from nuclear cooling towers, you'd probably say pollution, right? Or maybe radiation. Well, let me stop you right there. The actual amount of smoke or radiation in those giant clouds is exactly zero, like literally nothing. Remember how we need water to cool down the steam? Those towers are just cooling down the hot water. So those dramatic white plumes you see are 100% harmless water vapor. It's literally just a man-made cloud. Next up, Section 3, solar, the silent exception. Okay, so this brings us to our fifth energy source, and it is completely unique. Think about all the spinners we just talked about. Hydro, wind, thermal, nuclear. They all involve massive magnets, huge moving parts, rushing water, high-pressure steam, and they are all incredibly loud. Now compare all of that to solar. It is perfectly still. It has absolutely zero moving parts, and it is completely silent. So how on earth does it make electricity if it doesn't spin a magnet? It all comes down to photons, which are these tiny invisible particles of light. Here is exactly what happens. These little light particles travel all the way from the sun, literally crash right into the solar panel, and violently knock electrons directly off the silicon material inside the panel. Those freed electrons then flow through a wire, and boom, that's electricity. No turbines, no magnets, just light crashing into atoms. It throws Faraday's 1831 rule completely out the window. But as amazing as solar is, it has a massive catch. The power output starts low in the morning, hits its absolute maximum right at noon, and then drops to complete zero at night. For your models, keep in mind that solar needs wide, flat terrain far away from any shadows cast by mountains. Now, solar is growing incredibly fast all around the world because it's clean and it's super easy to build. But that nighttime zero, that is a huge, constant challenge for the people trying to run the grid. Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, the dilemma, the 50-year city choice. So, this right here is the ultimate engineering challenge I really want you to think about as you construct your physical tabletop models. Let's quickly summarize the core trade-offs. Hydro gives you massive, incredible power, but you need a giant river valley. Solar and wind are wonderfully clean, but they suffer from intermittency, which is a fancy way of saying they stop working at night or when the wind dies down. Thermal and nuclear give you fantastic 24/7 reliability, which we call baseload power, meaning it never ever stops. But they require constant fuel and massive amounts of cooling water. So if you take anything away from this explainer, remember this one rule. There is no perfect energy source, only perfect combinations. If you are the coordinator of a real-world grid, you can't just pick your favorite one. You have to constantly act like a DJ, mixing these different sources together. If the wind suddenly stops blowing, you have to immediately turn up the hydro or the thermal plants, because if you don't, the whole city goes completely dark. Which brings us to a final, slightly provocative question. I debate this with other educators all the time, and we honestly genuinely disagree on the answer. If you had to power a city with only one single source for the next 50 years, which would you choose? I mean, I might argue for nuclear, purely because I want ultra-reliable power at 2 in the morning when the wind isn't blowing. But someone else might push back and say, no way, it has to be solar, because they want pure, clean energy, and they're just hoping we invent better batteries soon. There is no obviously correct answer here. And honestly, that's the beautiful puzzle of engineering. So, as you go back to building your tabletop models, really think about your perfect grid mix. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I absolutely cannot wait to see what you all build.